You see the little cartoon of Robert Crumb off to the left there? He's got a big Oedipal problem, old Rob Crumb. And the problem with him, fundamentally, is his mother was something like a giant spider and did everything she possibly could to crush the life out of him, hence his remaining relationship with women. And so that's part of the reason why femininity can be something that turns you to stone. It's an experience that many men are familiar with, by the way, because the average man is rejected far more often than he's accepted. And since women are the gateway to reproduction, they constitute nature itself. And nature itself tells most men, you should go home and stay under your bed. There's lots of experiments done about this. So for example, psychologists will have an undergraduate woman go out into the concourse and see how long it takes her to find someone who agrees to sleep with her. And that takes 2 seconds after she asks the first man. And then they flip it, and they get your random undergraduate guy to do the same thing. Well, you can imagine the consequences of that, since many of you men have lived through it. Mother Nature, the woman wears the face of Mother Nature, and the face is generally rejecting, especially to men who are low in the dominance hierarchy, by the way, which is one of the things that irritates guys like Elliot Rodgers, and one of the things that motivates their desire to take revenge. And that's a universal phenomenon. So that's part of the reason that the feminine is nature, and why nature, by the way, is Mother Nature. It's like its diagnosis of your status is not good enough. The higher you are in the dominance hierarchy, the more resources you have at your disposal, and so the less upset you have to get when anything horrible happens. So if you're barely clinging to the bottom of the social structure, you can be sure that your brain is going to estimate any anomalous occurrence as a catastrophe, which is why people don't like being at the bottom of the dominance hierarchy, and it's also why people who are there die a lot sooner. And they die a lot sooner regardless of their absolute level of wealth. It's relative deprivation that counts. One of the things that your brain is very concerned with is relative status. That's wired in, by the way, which is partly why relative poverty is often such a social problem. People hate being low in status, especially men. Well, the male status hierarchy is a bit different than women, and women are pretty sensitive to status too, but they use different markers. Anyways, part of what happens when your status goes up is that your brain serotonin levels go up, and when your brain serotonin levels go up, you're less irritable and you experience less negative emotion per unit of uncertainty or threat. And so when you demean someone and you interfere with and you lower their presumed status as far as a very primordial circuit is concerned, you alter the system that regulates their emotions, and they hate that. People hate that more than anything, and it's an unbelievably archaic circuit. You can kind of tell this because depressed people basically act like they're low status, and depressed people are depressed about everything. Now, it's not easy to be depressed about everything, right? And so the fact that that's the case means that what's ever gone astray has to be very primordial because it affects everything. Anyways, people often use antidepressants to cure depression, hence their name. And antidepressants decrease the rate at which serotonin is taken back up by the neurons that produce it. Well, 300 million years ago, crustaceans emerged. And crustaceans live in dominance hierarchies, even though they're not particularly social. And if one lobster fights with another and gets defeated, then he won't fight with another lobster even when he beat for 20 minutes, unless you give him antidepressants, in which case he'll fight again right away. The reason I'm telling you this is because the status structure that underlies your being, not just your brain, but your being, is so old you share it with crustaceans. So you mess with it at your peril. It's not learned, by no means. So anyways, you wander around inside one of these little frames, going from point A to point B all the time. And one of the annoying things about life, and this is sort of the Sisyphus story, is that as soon as you climb from point A to point B, and you get there, then there's another point A and another point B. And that's kind of interesting too, because one of the things it suggests is that getting somewhere isn't really what people want, because as soon as you get somewhere, then you're done going there, and then you have to get somewhere else. So in some sense, it seems it's an accomplishment. In another sense, it's just the next rock up the mountain. Now you all know this because you graduated from university and that was a good day, but the next day you weren't a university student, you were some unemployed loser. And that's that sets up a whole new set of problems, right? I mean, that's how the frame shifts. And when the frame shifts like that, then the value of everything shifts around it. So it turns out that people are actually more interested in getting from point A to point B than they are in actually being at point B. And almost all of the positive emotion that you feel, which is related to dopaminergic circuitry, by the way, you experience in relationship to the pursuit of a valued goal rather than to the attainment of the goal. The attainment of the goal actually satisfies you, or more specifically, it satisfies that motivational circuit, but then the damn thing just shuts off and another one starts yelling at you. So it's like a perverse form of victory. So one answer to that that's universal in some sense is that you should establish a relationship with a transcendent value, because it never runs out of motivational power. And as soon as things fall apart, which they always do, you're in chaos, and as soon as you're in chaos, then your body defaults to emergency preparation and you're stressed, and if you're stressed long enough, then you die. And so you don't like that. Stress, when your body gets stressed, what happens is, because it doesn't really know what's going on, it prepares for everything. That's the generalized stress response. Cortisol production does that. Cortisol production is good, it wakes you up in the morning, but if it's chronic, you get old. Like, it's so general in its negative actions that the best way to conceptualize its detrimental long-term effect is that it accelerates aging. So it makes you more likely to have heart disease and cancer and depression and Alzheimer's and diabetes and obesity. That'll do. It's enough. Any of those are enough to kill you. All right, so there's a hierarchy. That's a hierarchy of values. The higher the value, the less you want to have it disrupted. Now, there's a psychologist named Piaget. Some of you might know about him. Piaget was very interested in what happens to value structures and their hierarchical organization once they have to apply outside of the confines of a body. So here's a way of thinking about it. 2-year-olds basically hypothalamic. That's why they're so much fun. First they're happy, then they're sad, then they're hungry, then they're tired. They just zip from one pretty straightforward and rather awe-inspiring motivational state to another. But at 2, they can't play. They can play by themselves, but they can't play with other children. They can't get that until they're 3. And they need to get it by the time they're 3, because if they don't get it by the time they're 4, they will never get it. And then you have an antisocial kid who's going to be an outsider for his entire life, and there isn't anything you can do about it. So that has to happen between 2 and 4. So what happens at about age 3 is that the kid learns how to play a game with another person. And what that game is fundamentally the development of the ability to share a frame of reference, which is what you're doing when you play Monopoly. It's like, it's stupid to play Monopoly, obviously. Who cares if you have a whole pile of counterfeit paper, right? But it doesn't matter, because the way you're constituted is that your brain will treat anything you act like constitutes a valuable goal as if it's a valid framework of reference. And if it couldn't do that, A, you couldn't abstract, and B, you could not get along with other people. So you can sit around the table and you can say, let's pretend that Monopoly is a reasonable facsimile of reality, which you wouldn't say, but it's what you mean. And everybody says, yes, that would be amusing. And so then you set your goal, which is to get all the little hotels and all the money, and poof, your emotions go along for the ride. And what's so interesting about that is you can get everybody into the game. And so one of the things that's really interesting about people is that we can establish a shared fictional frame of reference, and it organizes all our emotions so they're predictable. That's also why we can watch movies. You go to a movie, you identify the hero. You figure out what the hero wants, poof, you're the hero. And the way that works is, you don't look at the hero and think about what he's doing and evaluate it emotionally and then feel it. What you do is you specify the hero's goal, and then you map him onto your body, and you read off the emotional responses of your own body, and that's how you understand the hero. So it's embodied, you're using your embodiment as a computational device that can run simulations of other consciousnesses. We have these shared frames of reference, like when we're playing Monopoly. Okay, so children at 3 learn how to play games, and that means they learn how to organize their own internal motivational states into a hierarchy that includes the motivational states of other people. And that means they can play. And that's what you guys do when you're out in the world. Like, we're playing a game right now. We all know the rules. That's why we can all sit in this room and play the game without fighting with each other. You know, and the room is set up like a theater, and we all know the theater game. And the chairs are always facing this way at the moment, and so that's a hint that you should look forward, and this is raised, so, you know, the room is basically telling you what to do, because it's a stage, like all rooms, and because you're smart and socially conscious, you can walk into a staged room, and your body knows what to do. And if you're civilized and social, you just do it, then all the other primates can predict what you're up to.